Okay, this is my tutorial on how I Photoshop the pictures I take in meetings, whether it's a whiteboard, here's an example of whiteboard, a picture that I've drawn in my journal, or a picture of a graphic panel. I tried doing this once before and did like a whole spiel intro, and I realized that took like 15 minutes, and so rather than do that, I'm just gonna dive in. So let's start with the graphic panel. This photo, if you read the first half of the blog post where I'm posting this video, you'll know that this was an example of one of the good photos to take. So it's square on the page. It's not taken at an angle, so we won't have to do any manipulation or editing of the size. It's a really good start, and if you hit Control Plus to zoom in, what you want to see is that as you zoom, you can read a lot of the text, and it doesn't get really blurry until you're pretty far in. You can see up here it's 600% zoom level, and now you're starting to see the pixelation, and that's the goal, because you want people in general to be able to scroll around what you've taken a photo of and be able to read all of the text, or at least read it in terms of it's not blurry, but if it's illegible because I scribbled it too fast, that's a different problem. Another thing to note is this image is a .heic file, and that is what happens when you take a picture on your iPhone with live photo. Because we're in Photoshop and you can change the type of image from here, it's not a problem, but it is a problem if you're like trying to email it to someone with that HEIC extension. So we're eventually going to change that to a PNG, but the photo looks good to start. So what I'm going to do from the very beginning is go over to my layers palette, and I'm going to unlock the background. So now it's just layer 0. Imagine a layer as like a sheet of paper, and we're going to stack up different sheets of paper. So I'm going to create a new layer, and that's what I did by this little piece of paper here, and then move it behind layer 0. And what I want to do is make layer 1 be white. So I'm going to push this little I so we can see what we're doing here, and layer 1 is the only visible layer now. The photo disappears. We're going to hit the paint bucket tool. We're going to make sure we're using exactly white, so this foreground color is FFF. There's basically 6 letter Fs, and that is the hexadecimal code for white. And then we're going to tap on the screen, and now we've got a white background. We're going to turn back on layer 0, and there's many ways you can go about this, but in this instance, I'm just going to show you one way to do it. We're going to erase the parts of the photo that we don't want visible. So we're going to cut out the top and bottom and sides that are distracting. So what I went up here and I selected the rectangular marquee tool. The way that you do that is if it's the circular marquee or elliptical marquee that you saw, you basically have to click until this little side menu shows up, and then click on the one that you want. So rectangular marquee tool is the one we want. I'm going to close out this layers palette, which is basically like a drawer that you can open and close. And I'm going to make a rectangle, making sure that I'm on this top layer here, and select a rectangular area that I want to delete. And it's now you can see the active selection is these what people call marching ants, because it's kind of like a moving little dotted line. And I'm going to make sure that I have this add to selection active rather than single selection, because what I want to do is build on what we have selected and create more marching ants for each of the sides and across the bottom. My computer is already breathing heavily. I like to think of it as breathing heavily, but the fan is going, which tells me that this photo is really big and or I have a lot of processes going on my computer. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but it might move a little slow for us. So now that we have all of these areas selected, I'm just going to hit delete. Delete, go away. Nothing's happening. So that leads me to believe I'm not on the right layer. Aha. All right, so I was deleting the white background. So now I'm going to go back to layer 0 and delete that. And when there's nothing in place, when there's no background or paint color or anything, you'll see this like gray and white grid, and that just means it's transparent. But now that I've deleted what I don't want in our photo, I'm going to hit Control D, which deselects the area that you had the marching ants around. I'm going to hide this again. I'm going to go back to layer 1, and I'm going to use the paint bucket tool with white again and fill it in. So now we've got 2 layers. This is our active layer where we're going to be editing, and the white background, which helps us see what we need to change, because the goal is to get this background of the photo on the graphic panel to match that pure white. And right now it looks like a purpley gray, and we're going to fix that. But I'm noticing if I zoom in on these corners that I missed a couple spots in my crop, so I'm probably going to go in, making sure I have the right layer selected, and crop some of those out. The problem is when you use the Marquee tool, you know, some of these things, it's a perfectly straight line, and that means my picture is like slightly not straight, but I think I'm just going to go like halfway across, making sure I'm not deleting too much of the content that I've written down, and hit erase, Control D to deselect. So there is going to be right here like a little corner where the rectangle ended. That's okay for now. If there's other areas where this is a problem, or like this bottom right corner, I don't want that darkness showing, I'm going to do the same thing, trying to make sure I'm not cutting anything off. Control D, and then just down here, erasing that dark area, Control D. Okay, we're in business. So the next thing I'm going to do is click on the image menu and go to adjustments. This is where all the good stuff is when it comes to making color corrections and adding contrast or changing the look of the appearance of the picture. So image, adjust. The first thing I'll do is go into levels. And you've got this menu here and a graph that basically, I don't really understand it, but it's a histogram to show like how the quantity of pixels that are of a certain tone of black, gray, and white. But none of that really is something that you need to know. What you need to know is that if you click on this eyedropper tool and it's sample and image to set to white point, you click on this one. What you're doing when you pick an area in this photo is you're saying, I want this color to be pure white. So just to show you what that looks like, starting over here, this is probably like the brightest corner of what we're working with. If I click on this, boom, a lot of our photo is still colored nicely. And in this top right corner, you lose that edge between the layer 1 and the background white. But if we try move over here and click down here where you could still see that, now there's pretty much no visible edge, but what happens is you lose some of that contrast in the purple. So I'm going to pick something in the middle. We'll go back to the first one we clicked on. That looks great, but maybe if we click on somewhere towards the middle of our picture, we'll get something a little better. So I like the way this looks, and I'm going to probably leave it at that for now because we can go in and refine certain areas. And then the next thing I like to do is do the same thing but for black. And I'll click on set sample image to black point. This is black, white, and gray, or black, gray, and white. So the far left eyedropper is black. I'll pick something that looks pretty black already. We'll zoom out so you can see how this goes. That really didn't change much. I don't even know if you could see that I clicked on it. So that's a sign that what we have as black is nice and there's good contrast. Okay, so now we're done with the levels. We'll click OK. So you can already see that brightened it up a lot. And if you want to check on how you've evolved your drawing or picture over time, if you open up the history menu, you can go in and see all the actions that you've taken, and like just going from using the original photo to improving the white has made a huge difference. But there are still edges around here, and what I want to do is eventually crop this so there's a little bit of room to breathe around, but there's not a visible corner like here and here. So the next thing I'm going to do is a dodge and burn. So this little lollipop looking thing is the dodge tool, and you can see in the video demonstration here, it basically is like a brush that you can run over certain areas to brighten them up, and it's not doing it to the whole image. So I'm going to take that, and this brush size actually looks pretty good. It's the right width for what I want, but if you want to change your brush size, you can use the right and left bracket on your keyboard to make it smaller. That's the left bracket, and bigger for the right bracket. And then I'm just going to go in and I'm going to click and hold my mouse down and dodge certain areas that I can really see the edges. And what you want to look out for when you're doing this is to make sure that you're not washing out, because it's brightening up everything, not just the white. You want to make sure you're not washing out the colors that you had in there. So you don't have to make this perfect either. We're just trying to go and improve as much as we can around the edges without losing quality. So you can see I'm kind of losing quality in this bottom left area, so I'm going to undo. And I'm realizing that, you know, it was kind of hard to read in the first place. So I'll go back over that and lighten it up. I might make the brush bigger and just lighten up this whole left side a little bit because it does seem kind of dark. And then this whole bottom right looks kind of dark to me. The top right's looking really good. Maybe just like 1 or 2 hits on this corner here. And you might not even be able to see these subtle changes, but again, if you want to like track how it's evolved, go to the history menu and you'll be able to watch it step through. Okay, so everything is looking pretty good to me, still legible, and we still have some areas on the edges that are looking too visible to me in terms of the edge. So one option is to just keep dodging and burning. The problem is it's just like time consuming. So I think what I'm going to do now is show you another one of my favorite tools, and it's called the clone stamp. So the clone stamp is right here in the menu. It looks like a stamp. And what this does is it copies a color and then from a certain area of your picture, and then it duplicates exactly what you're hovering over into the new area that you want to paint. So this is kind of confusing. I'm going to increase my brush size with the right bracket, and then I'm going to hold down Alt and click on a bright white area of my screen. And I'm going to focus on just this bottom section for now. So hold down Alt, click on a bright white area, and then go to where you want to correct. And what's going on here? This isn't working. Or is my computer just being slow? Ah, I know what's happening. Because these are 2 separate layers, it's looking at, when I hold down Alt and I click on something that's on this layer, there's actually no information. So I'm at the point where I'm comfortable flattening. And what that means is we're going to just like merge these 2 layers and make them one. So first we'll go to layer. We're going to flatten it. So now when I use the clone stamp, we can see we only have 1 layer now, layer 0. I just unlocked it. I'm going to use the clone stamp, Alt, click on the white area and then paint with that above. So I'm basically just holding down my mouse, and what it's doing is it's copying whatever's down here where I set my anchor, and then it's duplicating it where I'm holding down the mouse and painting. So we're basically just painting pure white over those edges. Ooh, that looks good. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing up here. Just hit Alt. And when you hit Alt to make your selection, you also have to click. So Alt click means this is what I want you to copy, and then when you click again without the Alt held down, you're pasting it over those areas. So you can't really see the line up here, but I'm just going to make my brush a little smaller and do the same thing on the right side. This is the area that's got the most visible edge. Just kind of painting it out. Oh, so what happened there is as you move the mouse, the area, you can kind of see this showing up. The anchor moves too. So we're going to select this as the anchor area and then start higher up and work on my edges. Basically, if you find there's like a corner that's appearing, you need to reselect or re-anchor your reference point, your like color that you want. Alt, work on those edges. Okay, take a little look-see, zoom out. I like the way that looks. I think it's fine. There's like some areas that could be better. Maybe we'll finish up by perfecting this bottom area. So I'm making my clone stamp smaller, hitting Alt, using that as my reference, and running it right along the bottom here. Great. And that will do for what I need this normally to do. So the last thing I'm going to do is, because we have just one layer and everything is flat and looking good, I'm going to crop it. And when I said I like to have a little breathing room, what I mean is on the top and the bottom and both of the sides, maybe just like a nice little white border around the edges without the words getting too close. And this looks good. And now we're going to move into probably the most important thing, which is resizing and exporting. So in the image menu, this is where you can manipulate the kind of like, well, I guess I mentioned, the adjustments areas where you can manipulate things like color and vibrance, but we can also manipulate the image size. And that is probably thing number one. So this image size is 24 megs. If you put this in a Google Docs, like a Google Slides presentation, it's going to be really slow to load. And it's 56 inches wide, so it's going to be like way too big also. 4,000 pixels wide. So what we're going to do is, I like thinking in inches. 10 inches is a good width, I think. So you can already see the image size is now down to like below 1 meg. But we also want to bump up the resolution, because when it's only 72 pixels per inch, it's legible on screen, but as you zoom in, things get blurry faster. So I'm going to bump it up to 150. And over here, we've got a preview, which I think you can zoom into the preview, yeah. Just to make sure as you're saving it, you're not losing too much image quality. And I think that should be fine. Looks like a lot of the text is still legible, as much as we need it to be. And we've gotten it down to 3.35 megs. So one thing I might do is maybe make this 12 inches, because some of this text was a little fuzzy. It looks a little better. Okay, so it's 4.82 megs. Kind of big, but not too bad. And resample automatic, that's fine. Click OK. And now we've resized. Control plus will help you zoom in. We're at 100% here. It's looking good. And now we can save it or export I like the quick export as PNG. It's a new feature. I don't know if you'll have it in whatever Photoshop version you're using, but you want to save this. Remember where you're saving. This is, for my purposes, I just have a before and after folder, and then name it as, I'll call it graphic panel, and save it as a PNG. PNGs are really good for on-screen viewing. They're pretty quick to load. If you're going to do a big printout, I would recommend using a JPEG format. It's a little bit slower, and it looks different on screen than it does in printing, but it prints nicely. And you might also want to save the actual Photoshop file, so you can save that in a different folder as a before picture. And yeah, Photoshop image graphic panel.psd. So now you're going to have 3 versions, but as long as you're diligent with how you store your images and organize them, I think you'll be good. All right, so that's the graphic panel, and we'll move on from here. So I've just clicked on the whiteboard image that I took, and as I mentioned in the first half of this post, the whiteboard images are the hardest because you get these, you know, inevitable glare and shadows. This is actually a really good whiteboard photo despite these 2 areas of glare, because it's not a super shiny whiteboard. It was pretty smooth and matte. But I also wanted to show you there's like all these sticky notes, and it becomes tricky to make sure you have the quality and legibility of all these images. But again, this is taken from my iPhone, and the image quality is pretty good. So what we're going to do is, where would I start with this one? Obviously, I want to get this thing out, and it's kind of an awkward space. I don't think I need this inequity title. I do need this text. I might not even need this text here, but I'm just going to see as we begin to edit it how it starts to look. So back over here, unlock the background. I'm also going to create a new layer and move it below. I'll make that layer white with the paint bucket tool, and somehow my foreground turned to this brownish color. So I'm going to cancel and show you a quick way. If you just click on the default over here, it moves you back to black and white, and then if you click on these arrows, it switches the foreground to white. Hit the paint bucket tool, you've got your white, and then I'm going to hit Control T to resize with holding Shift down. Hit Enter when you got it to where you want it. And now I'm going to make sure I'm on this layer and image adjust my levels using the white point. I'm going to pick somewhere in the middle here. This looks pretty good. I'm losing some quality in some of the text on the whiteboard, like right here. So what I'm going to go in, I'm going to zoom in pretty far and say, hey, anything that looks like this is like a, supposed to be black, but it's like a brownish color. And I'm going to use the black matching point and select this and see what that does to all the black text. So that's too drastic of a change. It looks bad from, yeah, does a lot to the blue tones. I'm just going to click on something that's pure black again to get that re-equalized. You can also just Control Z your way out of something if you want to try it and it doesn't look good. So I'm just going to sacrifice, like, that doesn't really, people know that says conclusion and they're not going to necessarily be confused by what they see. Okay. A lot of difference in tone. There's like a lot of warm yellows and then blues, so I'm going to even that out with a dodge tool. Big bracket to make it a larger brush. Being careful here not to do much dodging on top of the pink sticky notes because they'll get washed out if I do that. So I'm just kind of going around and in between them. over areas on the whiteboard that are super visibly darker. And if you want, you can change how strong your dodge tool is. And in this case, I'm going to bump it up to 100 just to move along faster. But it's less subtle that way. And the more times you let go of your mouse and re-click it, it kind of like adds a layer to it. So if you just go over the same area without unclicking your mouse, I found it just takes like too much back and forth, too much brush work. So I just continually re-click and re-click. Just focusing on these white areas that I think are too dark. Down here I can go much lighter, and I don't care about this, so I'm just going to go way over it because I want that chair out anyway. And like this word data doesn't really mean anything in the context of what you're looking at anymore, so that may come out. All right, this is looking good. There's some areas in the middle here that I just want to brighten up a little bit, making sure not to do too much on top of the sticky notes themselves. That works. Everything is still legible. This is the type of thing that you could fiddle with for ages if you really needed to, but I'm going to move on. I'm going to go in and use my Marquee Tool, and I'm going to grab this bottom corner and just hit delete. Control D deselects it. We'll do it again down here. Delete. Control D. Do it over here. Delete. Control D. So you can see there's still a lot of areas that need to be brought up to pure white. I might try adjusting the levels. No, I'm going to go back to dodge and make my brush pretty big using the close bracket. Work on these edges a little bit. Make my brush smaller. Looks like I accidentally hit something on my keyboard to change what tool I was using. As you learn how to do this, your speed will come from learning all the keyboard shortcuts. And obviously you'll get faster as you have better photos. And just the more that you do it. It's a pain in the butt. And I think sometimes I do it unnecessarily just because it's kind of soothing, but other times it really pays off to spend the time to make these pictures look nice and still be legible. All right, so I think we're good, and I'm gonna flatten, layer, flatten image way down here, and I'm gonna zoom in. Looks like everything is still legible. I will check the image size. Zoom out down here a little bit. This looks like a good area to watch transform as we transform. We've got 29 megs, but I'm going to move this to 10 inches wide and 150. Zoom in a little bit. And the text looks a little blurry, so I'm going to bump it to 12 again. I might even go to make the height of it 12. Yeah, that's looking good. So now we're down to 12 megs. Again, it's kind of a big photo, but if these sticky notes are important to be able to individually read, you do need a bigger file. And save. So I'll move this to my after. I'll call this whiteboard. And in this case it's JPEG, but I know I want to just have it in on-screen display, not printed. So I'm going to change it to PNG, hit save. Good. All right, last one is a picture from my notebook. And this one does have a little bit of, it's still pretty square, but I do want to show you, if you had a photo that was lopsided or skewed at an angle so that like one side is taller or wider than another, I'll show you how to handle that. Same thing, background, white layer goes behind, paint bucket tool, back to my default and making it white, and then resizing, holding shift, hit Control T, and then make it the size you want. Oh, wrong layer. Control T on the top layer, hold shift, resize, move to the center, hit enter. Now I am going to show you a different technique. Control T is the transform tool, so you can resize things in any way. That's what we did to just resize it to see the white background. But if you wanted to, if something was not perfectly straight, if you hold down Command on a Mac and one corner of the image, it only moves that one corner. So you can make it a different perspective. It's called skewing. And what I'm doing here is just moving this bottom left corner down a little bit so that this bottom line of the notebook is going straight across. And it looks like there's a little dip in the top here, but this left side is slightly further lower. So I'm going to do the same thing, hold Control and move this side, this corner up. And it only works for corners. I'm going to do the bottom right corner to the right a little bit. And there's obviously, this is a small tweak, but in other cases it might be more extreme. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Marquee tool again. In this case, I really just want to focus on the thing that's drawn in the middle. So I'm going to do the Marquee tool, and then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I. And what that does is it inverts the selection. So it takes the rectangle and it grabs everything that's not the rectangle instead. So I'm like cropping it, but then deleting out everything that's not what I selected. And then working on this layer, I'm going to adjust the levels again. This one is interesting because you can kind of see like the paper behind it. And I'm going to try and eliminate that, and we'll see how it goes. So using the white eyedropper, boom. Yeah, the ghosting behind is definitely visible, and I'm wondering if I select it. Yeah, if you grab an area that does have the ghosting and it's darker, it kind of disappears. Woo! I love this stuff. Okay, that looks awesome. So yeah, there is a bit of experimentation, and I think because the levels worked out so well, I'm just gonna leave this as it is. So I will flatten the image. Going to layer, flatten. Looks like it didn't flatten for some reason. Unlock. And now I'm going to use the Command C, which is crop. Just hit that on your keyboard and crop it to whatever your heart desires. Hit enter when you're done cropping. Image, check out the image size. Yeah, 31, that's huge. So I'm gonna go to 8 inches because I think that'll be enough. 150 pixels per inch. Let's see how that changes anything. I think everything looks good still. Hit OK. Zoom in. Got my pretty little compass cycle. And save it. Well, the export, quick export is PNG this time. Move it to the after, and we'll call it notebook. And save. Okay, thanks for sticking with me through this long ass video, and I hope it was helpful. I'm going to try and bookmark certain things, features that I use, so you can see and skip to areas as you're working on your own and you want to work on something specific. Hit me up if there's anything that I didn't cover and you're still struggling with. Okie dokie.